what you want, when you want it, where you want it. This is The Mesh.
Hey, this is Moose from Street Circle Drive. That's the Hickory, North Carolina-centric podcast here on The Mesh. Be sure to check out our show and all the others at themesh.tv.
Footcandle Films. Film news and reviews from two guys who really like movies.
This episode is brought to you by the Footcandle Film Society. For a schedule of upcoming screenings and membership information, visit the Society's website at www.footcandle.org.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Footcandle Films here on themesh.tv. This is our ongoing film discussion, review, and discussion about film news show here on the Mesh.tv network. My name is Alan Jackson. I am a co-founder and co-director, respectively, of the Footcandle Film Society and the Footcandle Film Festival. Who is the other co, you may be asking, in that co-title? Well, it's the gentleman right across the table from me.
Hello.
Chris Fry, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Looking forward to talking movies.
As always, we love getting together. We have normally a couple of reviews of films, followed by some news items and recommendations at the end of the episode. So we've got a lot to cover. Today we'll be reviewing two films in particular. The first one up is going to be Olympic Dreams, which is a film starring Nick Kroll, taking place during the 2018 Winter Olympics. Then following that will be a review of the film VHYes. And just so it's clear, it's VHYes, VHYes, by I'm tell you what, I'm just going to wait to discuss that film when we get to the review, because I'm not even sure I can sum it up in a one sentence here. I will let you have the honor of doing that when we get to that review. Sure. Then we'll be following that up with some news items. We have a This Could Be Good segment where we discover a film that is in production or possibly nearing release that we have just been made aware of that sounds like it could be good based on certain factors. And then we'll talk a little bit about some of the impact. As we record this show, we are in the midst of the coronavirus outbreak and all the proper precautions that's being taken across the country, how it's impacting the film schedule. A lot of films are being delayed, moved, changed. We're just going to kind of hit some highlights on that during our news section. Then we'll end up the show with our recommendation, each of us sharing a film that we think is worth checking out, especially if people are going to be a little more separated from others for the next little bit of time, trying to find some ways to entertain themselves at home. We may have some films that you could check out that may pass some time for you. So, Chris, full slate of things. Are you ready to get started?
Let's do it.
All right. We're going into our first review then, which is the film Olympic Dreams.
Hey, Coach. Just calling to say I'm freaking out a little bit. I've prepared for this my whole life. When it's done, I hope I really feel like an Olympian.
Do you know where the medical center is? I'm a volunteer dentist. All right, I'll just keep wandering.
Oh, hey.
So, Chris, in Olympic Dreams, we have a film that has an interesting premise behind it. It actually is shot and takes place completely, or almost completely, in the Olympic Athlete Village during the 2018 Winter Olympics in Pyeongchang. In this story that we follow a young cross-country skier as she bonds with a volunteer doctor after the competition ends for her. So we have a film that is taking place in a very unique setting. I think this is the first film ever shot and produced in the actual Olympic Village, where all the Olympians live and hang out before and after their own competition takes place. The film stars Nick Kroll, who is known as more of a comedy actor for television and other shows, but has slowly been getting into some more dramatic film work. And then also Alexa Pappas, who is an actual Olympian. She is a runner, but in this film she plays a character, Penelope, the cross-country skier I mentioned earlier. She, Nick Kroll, and her husband wrote the film while her husband was also the director of it as well. So, Chris, when we have a film like this, that's a very interesting concept and a very interesting location. My question to you in reviewing this film, was this a film that was completely carried by that unique premise and location, or was there more to it beyond just the cool fact that it's being shot in the Olympics was there more to recommend this as a film, or is it better served as maybe a travelogue documentary?
Well, I mean, I think the location does make the film. It is, at least for me, I've always been interested in the Olympics. Much like the dentist in the film, he's always been a big fan of the Olympics. So have I. I watch them every year, or every year they're on because they stagger them. But yeah, so that was neat getting to see kind of a behind the scenes look at the Olympics. But of course, because this is structured as a narrative film with the description you provided about, a skier meeting up with a doctor and kind of like a little bit of a relationship they have going during the time they spend together, that part didn't quite work as well for me. But I would still say the movie was worthwhile for me watching because I did enjoy the behind the scenes aspects of the film. If I were to guess, I would say that maybe the weak part was the fact that probably the scenes were improvised as opposed to like a, letter by letter or line by line script. And, people are probably familiar with Nick Kroll. He's a comedian. So him being able to improv, probably, I think we could say that, he could do that, no problem. His co-star in the film, who is an actual Olympic athlete in real life, she was a runner, long distance runner, instead of actually being a skier. Would be Alexi Pappas, who wrote it and, co-director, or her husband was the director. I don't think her strength is probably lies in improv. Some of the more scripted out things in the film, or at least what I thought might have been scripted out, I think she was able to deliver better. And having seen her in a previous film, Tracktown, that was about an athlete that has similar themes to this movie, that one I think was purely scripted, and that one seemed to go a lot better. So, improv maybe not the strong suit of this film. And since this film, I think a lot of the scenes were improv, I think that kind of hurt it a little bit. But what were some of your thoughts on it?
Right. So I will give the film credit for the concept. I do think, filming in the Olympic Village, I'd say 90% of the footage was shot inside the actual Olympic Village or where the Olympics are taking place.
Sure.
So during the 2018 Olympics with real Olympians too. Everybody else on the cast, I think with the exception of Nick Kroll, is an Olympian. I mean, when we see them talking to Olympians, that is why, and
so
it's true
an air
Olympians.
Of authenticity, because you can tell, this is the real deal.
That's right.
Stuff's happening.
So I like the concept, and I can tell that the film was shot on a very thin crew, thin budget. I mean, it was had a very documentary feel to it in the way a lot of the scenes were shot and framed, and I liked all that. And I also will say I think Nick Kroll was game for this film. I think he was kind of all in on wanting to play the part he had, and seemed to be generally, he was a producer, seemed to be generally pretty interested and played the part pretty well. I think when the film wants to be more of that behind the scenes travelogue and more of the let's explore the Olympics side of that, it really works. The problem is that's not the film it is half the time. Sure. The other half the time, it does try to be that more improvisational drama, romantic film. And that's where I feel it just kind of grinds to a halt and doesn't work. So it's tough. It's tough because I don't want to fault the film. I think it's noble in its intentions, and I think it's at least slightly enjoyable to watch. But yeah, those dramatic scenes where we're supposed to have a real heart-to-heart, really meaningful conversation between the two lead characters, I do hate to say it. I think it is Alexa Pappas. I just don't think she can carry those moments where Nick Kroll, I think, can work on his feet and can kind of play with the scene where she just seemed a little uncomfortable in that area. So it made it hard to see the two people as real people having a connection.
And chemistry between them.
Yeah, the chemistry was tough. It really was. And I do think the film had a hard time deciding, are we a drama? Are we a romance? Or where do we want to go with this film? I don't really feel like there was really ever a clear vision of what the film was meant to be.
But you would think with Nick Kroll, they would just kind of veer more into the just comedy romance.
Yeah, be a light romance with some comedy involved. And there were moments of that. But then
maybe just do comedy drama and skip the romance, which might have worked better.
And I think that could have been too. But I think they were just – it kind of felt like they were making it up as they go, which, again – some films work that way. Some films, if you've got actors who are really game for that and you've got a really great, kind of team to work with, sometimes the movies do just kind of write themselves as you go along. This one, I felt it was more, they were forcing pieces into different scenes just to make a fairly thin story work. And I also feel like, they even that opening monologue we heard in the trailer, just her talking on the phone and talking about how, this is the Olympics and it's kind of her dream and she wants to be the kind of person she wants to be, all this stuff. I felt the themes were just really broad and generic and just weren't really interesting. So I wish I could say more positive about the film. I did have some issues with it, but I will say at least I credit the filmmakers for making an interesting film in the environment that they did.
Well, there was enough in it for me that, and it was, there were some comedy moments that were funny. And I, attribute those to Nick Kroll, but then also they were, as you mentioned, there were kind of snippets behind the scenes with athletes, and those were my favorite parts. Those, there could have been more of them, but there were enough of them that I found it entertaining. Yep. There was a conversation with a Jamaican bobsledder guy and like how you do things. And like that was actually Alexi Pappas kind of asking questions, but just the way that was handled, I found that interesting. There's apparently maybe the youngest Olympian at one point is in the dentist chair with Nick Kroll, and their exchange was cool. An Italian athlete refusing to speak English to kind of get a rise out of Nick Kroll, and then he finds out he can speak English. There again, found that funny. And somebody who I was aware of from the Olympics in 2018, Gus Kenworthy. I remember he's like a skier and he's, does snowboarding type stuff too. Has like a really big personality. I remember seeing, how the Olympics does those kind of vignettes of the different athletes and they kind of tell their story. I remember seeing one on him and I was like, yeah, that guy's, got ridiculous amount of charisma. He shows up in this movie as one of the featured Olympians and he couldn't have been more natural to me.
He was great.
And apparently, I guess he's been on American Horror Story, I come to find out. So he's a little bit of an actor, or is going to be, I think, in one of their seasons. I don't watch the show, so I'm not familiar with it. But I can see how, when he gets feeling like he's too old to do snowboarding or whatever, he's going to be fine because he's got a career.
No, he was great. Actually, he only appears in the film about halfway through, and he's only in there for like 2 or 3 scenes, but he's really good. He's good. He's enjoyable in there. Yeah, that's the thing is that I think there were so many really interesting, great moments of the film that you kind of just wished they had made a film that was more all in on the Nick Kroll interviewing, talking to Olympians, and even Alexa Pappas walking through some of the events at the Olympics. Those parts were great.
Him walking around with her.
Yeah.
Granted, here we are like making a movie that doesn't exist.
Sure.
But we like the concept of this, but him just walking around as a comedian riffing with people, and Alexi Pappas could just be his like guide.
She knows the athletes. She knows the events.
And he'd be like, okay. But just the two of them kind of doing a behind the scenes documentary would have been hilarious.
There was a scene, there was a whole montage in this film that I thought was probably my favorite part of the film where she says, hey, do you want to go walk around? It was kind of an awkward dialogue leading up to it. It's this whole, do you want to go walk around backstage and see all the Olympic events, which is kind of a weird thing to propose. But anyway, and he's like, sure. That moment where they actually start walking around together and they're really like examining the different events and talking about the athletes and what they're going through, that part was awesome. It's like if I had an hour and 20 minutes of that, I would love it. And then mix it in with some humor from Nick Kroll. Yeah. They're kind of commenting on the relationships of some of the ice skaters, the pairing of the skaters, great stuff. And that was good. So it's a shame that they felt the need to kind of keep weaving in and out of this light romance and then adding in these overly dramatic elements of both Nick Kroll's home life and her kind of where she is in her life at 22 years old, all upset and she doesn't know what she's going to do. It's kind of tough. And it's a little ridiculous too. It's like, you're an Olympic trained person. You're 22 years old and you're feeling like everything, you feel like you don't know what you're going to do. It was a little tough. I felt it was a little over dramatic for dramatic's sake to make the story work. And again, those are the moments that just kind of fell flat for me. So with it.
See that.
So I think it's an enjoyable watch. If what we've described, the premise of it sounds interesting, then it is an interesting film. And I think it's a passable enjoyment, to watch. It's just Don't go in expecting anything too deep. Don't go in expecting anything too great on story. But I think the spectacle and what you see and what they show is pretty interesting.
If you don't like the Olympics, probably pass on this.
Yeah, it's a good move there,
If you
too.
don't
I
like
agree.
Nick Kroll, probably pass on this. But if you like both, I would say, yeah, give it a watch.
All right, so we're kind of I'm a little iffy on it. Chris seems to be a little more positive. I think I may have brought down your expectations, Chris. But I saw the film a night before you did, and I might have brought your expectations down, which is a smart thing to do. I'm going to give that as a little tip to all the listeners. If you're ever too excited for a film, do whatever you can to lower those expectations before you go in, and you will come out with a much more enjoyable experience. I promise you. All right, so Chris, talking about experiences, why don't we move into our second review, which is the film VHYes.
Hi there. My name is Ralph, and I just got this camera.
To kind of balance the muzzle of the gun while they shot Skeet.
My Easter nightmare.
This is the beginning of the fall of mankind.
Blast it off!
We have to have lesbian sex and orgasm multiple times.
Okay, so
with that,
that would be the trailer from VHYes, as Alan was talking about before they gave the title. So this comedy is a bizarre kind of retro comedy. It, if you are led to believe that it is true, was actually shot entirely on VHS and Betacam. So those are the old formats that, young people listening to this may have no idea what this taught, but probably so, because it's in enough of like retro pop culture. Stranger Things exists and they talk about these things. So because of that, you may have some reference point. And the loosely based idea of the film is this kid's got a video camera. They got it for Christmas. He tapes over his parents' wedding with things that he records off TV, late night TV, or things that he's running around with this camera and his friend and shooting kind of on the fly. And that pretty much is what this film is. It comes in at a breezy 72 minutes. Mm-hmm. It is kind of a compilation comedy because the things that end up coming off the late night TV end up kind of being skits or vignettes. Mm-hmm. So you kind of cram a bunch of those things together, and that's what this movie is. I watched this movie from the comfort of my own home. Alan, you were playing a bit of catch up today here in the office. You were right next to me, kind of watching it so we could record. I did happen to hear a couple of chuckles, but I was working with my headphones on, so I did not hear your entire enjoyment level of the film, but I know that it at least elicited one or two chuckles from you. My question is, was it worth watching the film? Would you recommend it? Or did you literally just have one or two chuckles, so you would not recommend it?
I think I did a really good job of suppressing my laughter from the room next door, Chris.
Okay.
If you had taken off your headphones and actually been listening natively, you probably would have heard a lot more. Okay. I found this hilarious. I had such a good time with this movie. It is... Okay, a little background. I love sketch comedy. Kentucky Fried Movie. Do you remember that film from the 80s?
I have
John Landis.
It's one of my college friends' favorite movies.
Yeah.
I've never actually seen it.
Yeah.
I think I've seen pieces of it,
Sure.
but I've never actually seen it all the way through.
Just, bizarre, random, stitched together skits where there's a general through line trying to connect them, but they're really loose connections. It's just a great reason to bring a lot of funny skits together. I love that style of movie. I just do. So this was right up my alley.
Okay. They made this movie for you.
I laughed so much of this movie. It's a near perfect use of the VHS format. This is from someone who, I grew up shooting VHS tapes on a camcorder.
You made a Teddy Ruxpin horror movie.
I did. I have all VHS shooting. Right. I've edited VHS tapes. I was the one recording stuff off my family TV onto a VHS camcorder. Mm-hmm. This was me. And I love the 80s. I love this time period, and just seeing how well recreated I feel like the time period is.
Right.
There's some segments that, maybe a little more glossy than what I would have thought from the, but it's minor quibbles I've got. I mean, almost exclusively every single sequence you visit, a parallel to something maybe you saw as a kid or in that time period, at least for me.
Sure.
So I really had a good time with this movie. I'm actually kind of itching to see it again.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
I actually, I think I rented it on iTunes. It's got a 48-hour window. I think I will be using it again in that 48-hour window. So I loved it. I had a lot of fun. I do have a couple cons. I'll get to in a little bit, some things that didn't work, and I've got more specifics, but I really want to hear your thoughts, Chris. What about you?
The concept, is laid out there by the title. And in the description that I say, it's pretty clear, like, this is what it is.
Yeah.
It worked for me. It remains loyal to the premise, and I applauded that. Specifically, it made me nostalgic for my childhood and, early days of, like, even my career trying to run around and shoot things with a VHS camera, kind of the crappy quality, or like, they would have dropout lines. All this, like, real technical stuff, but you're like, yeah, this is legit. Plus, kind of a cool part was seeing the discovery of what it was like as a kid to discover a camera, and you shoot stuff that has no point.
Yeah.
So a lot of times there's like, he'll just shoot like his mom in the kitchen, or he'll shoot like leaves and the sun, and it has no point. And I'm not talking about like a quick 5 seconds, but there's kind of some meandering stuff that doesn't really go anywhere. And they could totally cut out of the movie, and some people would say, oh, it'd make it funnier. And it probably maybe would. But there's something about the factor of just kind of letting it be loose and giving it, seeing like it was actually as if it was recorded over a wedding. So like random thing, it just kind of, I don't know, gives it a little bit of authenticity that I was kind of impressive for them to kind of stick to that.
Well, and without spoiling it, I mean, I think you may find yourself questioning, why is it that half the stuff you're watching is very realistic, like VHS shooting, a kid shooting it. Oh, here's his mom. And now he's just shooting he and his buddy talking about stuff and having fun. And then it cuts to these late night TV bits, which all start out pretty normal. I mean, they're like, I've seen late night shows like this. One is like a music interview show, and one is like a home shopping network type of thing.
One's like a painting with Bob Ross
right.
type.
Yeah. All shows that you've seen examples of, they all start to get more and more bizarre as time goes on. And you start to wonder why the mixture of this real footage that somebody would be shooting with their camcorder with this more bizarre, outlandish skits, the way they're going. By the end, they do try to tie it together and make it mean something. I'll admit the ending, I think, is a little on the weaker side. I don't think they quite accomplished the goal of what they were trying to do. But
I think they I appreciate when I saw kind of where there was like, oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And then something about like, but then they kind of closed it back to being too nice. And if they would have let it just go kind of completely out there, that would have been
well, there's just a through line again, not to spoil, but his parents, the fact that it's recording over a wedding tape, there's something about that. There's a reason why it's a wedding tape that he's accidentally recording over. Right. And again, I loved where they were trying to go with it, and I was excited for it to kind of come to a conclusion. And by the end, it's like, oh, okay. Well, I feel like it kind of wimped out at the end, but or didn't really give a great, satisfying conclusion. That being said, though, I still think a lot of the skits and performances were really, really good, and many of them were really funny. Some very disturbing. Some very, some great. I think the actors there's a lot of unknown actors in here, people I've never seen before, but
Thomas Lennon.
He's Lennon.
Like the MVP.
God, he's so good.
He is.
Well, and Carrie Kinney, also someone who normally works with Thomas Lennon from the State, the days of the State on MTV. She plays the Bob Ross kind of stand-in character, and she becomes progressively more interesting as the film goes on.
Yes.
And then even the director of the film is the son of Susan Sarandon and Tim Robbins, both who make cameos in the film. Tim Robbins had a little bit more to do. Susan Sarandon really just pops in for like one quick shot.
Right.
They seem to be having a good time.
They did.
I'll leave it at that.
And actually, they did. And it was a little jarring for me because of the nature of both of them being in there. I was like, wait, why are they? But it was actually kind of distracting me. I was like, when I found out, saw the directors, and it was like, oh, I get it. Yeah. That's their kid.
Susan Sarandon's, I thought, was jarring.
Yeah.
Tim Robbins, honestly, at first glance, I didn't know it was him.
Right.
But after a while, I started to realize who it was.
And the way that segment kind of, because I remember it's kind of being, his segments are kind of a take on those games that used to be sold back in the 80s where you would play a part of a videotape and it was like a mystery or a haunted house type thing. Like, I had one of those games.
Yeah, I did too.
So the thing was like, and the way they were using it was not even just straightforward. It was like a meta commentary going on about that. So no, that was okay. But yes, Sarandon's was a little.
Her shot was really a wheels into the frame, looking at the camera. It's very clearly her, and you're like, what's going on with that? And then she's back out. So, I thought it was great. I had just a fun time with it. And I do have to give out a shout out to my MVP. I don't have his name.
Thomas Lennon.
Okay, well, Thomas Lennon I think is great.
Okay.
But kind of an unknown from the film that I thought was, every time he came on screen, he just made me laugh. And I don't know his name because the cast list of this film is so freaking long, and they don't have pictures for the actor, so I don't know which one it is. Okay. I'll just tell you, it's the fellow who played the guy in most of the porno segments. Okay. Delivering the wood. I'll just leave it at that.
Oh, yeah.
He was so good as the
his
dumb.
Name, but I don't know who. Yeah.
He's the one that encounters the spaceship women.
Yes.
He played that part so well.
Bad acting, but yet good comedic timing.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep. So good.
My favorite section of that was the driving in the truck.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
That was amazing.
It was great. It was so good. So I love it. This is exactly my kind of movie. Okay. I did, after I watched it, I was curious. I went to go check out other reviews of other places. And it's like, reviews are all over the place.
Sure.
I saw, I think, either Rolling Stone or RogerEbert.com gave it 1 star and just railed on it. But then, it's got 80% Rotten Tomatoes. I mean, it's obviously very divisive.
It's a very niche film. You have to like comedy. And then within that, it's a very specific type of comedy that you have to like. And I liked it, but I could see how it's totally not for everybody.
Oh man. See, I'm already excited now to see it again. So that'll be, unfortunately I can't watch it with my younger kids, but I will watch it. I'll watch it on my own later tonight. So maybe my wife will not enjoy this. So I'm afraid it's just for me. This is an Alan film. So
well, I'll say it's an American, you mentioned Kentucky Fried Movie. For me, I wasn't familiar with that, but I was familiar with it, but I hadn't seen it. Mm-hmm. But to me, this was like an American version of Monty Python's, and now for something completely different.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Or the other way.
It's a framework of a film, but it really is a collection of skits that are just tied loosely together. That was the other one they did. That
was like an anthology. This same type way where, I really liked those as a kid. And am I putting this up there saying it's as good as those? Well, no, because I put those on a very high pedestal. But this is still pretty good.
I think it's hilarious. I really do. I think it was fun. I had such a good time with it.
I remember kind of suggesting this a while back as maybe a trailer tapas, and we didn't do the trailer for it. And now I'm glad that we didn't.
I'm glad we didn't.
So now you just got to
I really hadn't seen any of it. I hit play on once I rented it, and it was fresh new for me at that point. So very, very cool. All right. Well, that is VHYes, and that is available online as we speak. Actually, both films are available online. Olympic Dreams is available as well, so you can actually download it, stream it from your typical movie services right now. So that's going to be our 2 reviews. Let's go ahead and take a quick break, Chris. When we come back, we do have our news segments, and the first one being this could be good, and you have to raise up your voice and do the question mark at the end when you introduce this segment, where we talk about a potential new project that sounds exciting, a couple of news, film release schedule updates, and then we'll end up the show with our recommendations. So stay tuned. You're listening to Footcandle Films here on themesh.tv.
This podcast is sponsored by Jackson Creative, a custom communication agency located in downtown Hickory, North Carolina, specializing in online content creation. To learn more, visit thejacksoncreative.com. Jackson Creative, we tell your story.
Welcome back to Footcandle Films here on themesh.tv. First half of the show, we did our reviews of Olympic Dreams and VHYes. So now we're going to move on to some movie news segments, and we have some little package segments we like to jump into. This first one being one we call, I think this could be good, and raising up at the end, Because, again, what we do is we explore a project that has some elements about it that sounds interesting, but could there be some pitfalls? We don't know. Let's talk about one and see. Chris, what I think this could be good segment do you have to share with us today?
So we talked recently about Todd Haynes making a documentary of Velvet Underground. We were both kind of excited about it. Sound like that would be good. So director Peter Jackson, he of doing They Shall Not Grow Old, taking footage of First World War, colorizing it, assembling it, putting out a documentary. Kind of had mixed results for you and I.
It did. It was a little bit of a letdown for me.
Sure.
I guess because it really, I love the concept of the film, but it
seemed clumsy.
And just after the first 30 minutes or 45 minutes, once everything goes to the reconstructed footage, I just feel like it didn't really have a whole lot to give after that. So, but
agreed.
Yeah.
So news has come out that Mr. Jackson is making another documentary, this time assembling footage together that is previous footage that has been out. But it is for the Beatles, specifically for their album Let It Be, and they made a film, which I have never seen. Why? Because it's actually apparently really hard to get a hold of. They've never released it on DVD or Blu-ray.
The film is also called Let It Be, correct?
It did come out on Laserdisc, which apparently you can go on like eBay and places and Amazon and see it for like hundreds of dollars.
Wow.
I would like to see it because I'm a huge Beatles fan. Well, now apparently come to theaters this fall, Mr. Jackson has assembled something. Now, is it a Beatles documentary that just uses some of this footage? It's kind of unclear, but I have a lot more faith that this will be something that will be good. Not only sounds like it could be good, but that will be good.
Okay, all right. I'll give you. And I had read about this project, so I'm kind of feigning my surprise. I'm sorry when you're bringing this up, but I was kind of familiar with this. Yes, I feel like it's going to be good. However, a couple little red flags for me.
Sure.
One, I wasn't terribly impressed with his last documentary, so that's obviously a little bit of a concern to see him do this. Is it the quote I heard from the head of Disney? Disney is the one distributing this,
allowing it to happen, right?
And I forget the name of the guy who was running Disney up until just recently. I think he just quit. But
Bob Iger.
Yeah, Bob Iger. His quote was saying that it's basically saying this like it's so much brighter and more cheerful than like the Let It Be film, which was kind of considered a little bit darker period for the Beatles. I mean, it was their last concert, their last album. It had a lot of footage from that rooftop concert they did, their very last performance.
It's not readily available because supposedly after it was all cut together, the Beatles didn't like it.
Kind of didn't want to have anything to do with it.
It portrayed them in a favorable light, and so there you go.
All right, so I as long as it's authentic, as long as it's real and not overly glossed over, that's the only thing I get worried about is, just over glossing these rock documentaries or music documentaries. And I'm never a fan of that. But I will say, at least I know, I did read Paul and Ringo, both on board, and even Yoko Ono, Lennon, and Olivia Harrison, both have kind of given their blessing. So it's got the blessing of everybody. Sure. Everybody involved is on board with it.
I understand your hesitancy because that could mean that it is a very pandering film and doesn't give you. But I mean, with people still, obviously, two of the founding members of the Beatles are still alive. I don't know that you can get a true picture until years from now because getting rights and all that kind of stuff is complicated.
So, like Variety.com, Variety Magazine, they actually had published that they had viewed a top secret trailer of Get Back earlier in the year. A trailer hasn't come out to the public, but they saw it.
So that's going to be the name is Get Back.
Get Back.
The title of one of the songs. Okay.
And they said that, comparing it to the Let It Be film, yes, it's very tonally different. This film is brighter visually and spiritually with many, many shots of the Beatles joking around, making fun of each other, singing in silly accents and all that, which again, sounds like it would be fun to watch, but
it was
how
just all from
much?
Like the first day in the studio, as opposed to like the later days.
Well, and they also said there's going to be footage in the film from that legendary 42-minute rooftop concert, the very last concert they ever did, which I love that.
Right.
The whole style of everything I've ever seen of that concert. So I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful it's good. I'm hopeful it's a real documentary and not just a overproduced commercial for some new reissuing of the Beatles albums or something. You know, I want it to be real and want it to be really interesting and insightful. And I hope we get that. So
it would be nice.
All right. So I agree with you, Chris. I do think it could be good. So let's move on to our next segment, which is just some news. And this doesn't have any fancy title name to it here or anything, Chris. It's just, as I mentioned at the top of the show, we're recording this right in the midst of everything starting to kind of go a little crazy because of the coronavirus outbreak and what we as a nation and the world are trying to do with kind of being a little more self-separating from others and not going to large events, a lot of large events being canceled and postponed and so forth.
Right.
Well, as we kind of expected, movie theaters are going to be taking a big blunt of this. I mean, movie theaters obviously are a place where people, generally in the larger quantities of people, getting together to experience something together in a closed room environment. Absolutely not the environment you want to promote when you're trying to get people to stop the outbreak of a communicable virus. So as it stands right now, there's a lot of films that were scheduled to be released in the next couple months that are already getting pushed back. Mm-hmm. Let me give you some notable ones. This is probably the most dramatic one, that one that I think everybody kind of really took notice to when it happened. Universal Studios announced that their latest Fast and Furious movie, which I think is called Fast 9,
right?
Because it's the 9th movie in the series. I just got that. I did not understand how they got the name Fast 9, but I totally get it now. Fast 9 was supposed to be coming out in, I think, in just a few weeks. It's been moved back an entire year. Mm-hmm. It's going to April 2021.
That's
significant. So obviously the studio said, we really want this film to come out in April. We feel like April is the best time for us to release it. And since we cannot do it this April without impacting box office, we're just going to bump it a whole year. Pretty crazy.
It's a pretty big measure. Yeah.
Yeah. No Time to Die, the latest James Bond film, supposed to come out in April. It's now coming out in November. It was supposed to be released internationally April 2nd and in the U.S. on April 10th. Now it's been moved to November. Disney has postponed the theatrical release of Mulan. Okay. So that will now be pushed back. That was supposed to come out March 27th. Now it's has not been rescheduled officially, but they have postponed it. It's just the word. And you got to think with all these ideas.
Just stick it on Disney Plus.
Well, I mean,
to try to get people to
I do want us to talk about that a little bit. Sure. I think that may be where some of these studios have to end up going because, we all know from the theater business right now, it's a little on the shaky side anyway. Unless you are a big tentpole franchise blockbuster, they're just not making a lot of money from theatrical distribution anymore. Right. Smaller films are not getting the screens that they need to get noticed. So, when you get all these films starting to get pushed back, and we don't know where this whole virus environment is going to lead us to, where if there's going to be a much longer, prolonged period of not wanting to get groups of people together very big. And if that's the case, what happens to the movie theater experience? Do these studios start saying, well, heck, let's just release them online. We'll charge $10 to let people watch it on opening weekend and just go that route. And I mean, what if they're successful? Yeah. Then it becomes a matter of, okay, is this the tipping point? Is this where things change for movie theaters? I don't know, but it's very interesting times. And I thought a little, unfortunately, negative karma.
Quiet Place 2 had also been moved.
Yep, Quiet Place 2 got moved. Several others have gotten moved, but I just brought up the movie The New Mutants.
Yeah.
As a film that is going to be released and now sounds like it's actually going to be pretty good. Well, it's been removed from their schedule altogether.
So now it's completely gone.
Well, I mean, it's just not been rescheduled.
Gotcha.
It was supposed to come out April 3rd. Okay. It's just been moved from the slate. Now, they could bring it back and reschedule it. We don't know, but there's no telling what they're going to do. Another film called Antlers was also same idea from Fox. It was a sci-fi horror film produced by Guillermo del Toro. I think not Bradley Cooper. He was involved in another film I'll mention later. But this film, Antlers, was supposed to come out April 17th via Searchlight, and it's kind of just been moved off as well. Now, the one film right now that is a big blockbuster movie that has not been moved, May 1st, Black Widow. Still on the books as of right now.
Okay.
So,
interesting.
Yeah. I think May 1st may be just far enough out to say, let's wait a few more weeks and see. Or let's just wait and see. And we'll make a decision in April on what we do.
Because then if you think about it, if that is the case and they keep it there, there are going to be all these people pent up like wanting to go see a movie.
That's
and
true.
It's like, here's finally a new movie. And it would have been a big movie anyway because of Marvel, but it'll be like, be ridiculous.
They're playing their cards close right now to see how far they can push it without delaying the film, to see if they can maximize that attention, like you said. Now, a couple things too about this. I mean, we're talking about films that are supposed to be released in the next couple months, but this virus is also affecting production of future projects as well. So most notably, a couple of those. Disney, again, has announced that production and pre-production has halted on several kind of high-profile pictures. The Last Duel, which we talked about in a previous episode, that's the one Ridley Scott's directing a film with Matt Damon, Adam Driver, and Ben Affleck. That has been halted production-wise, so we don't know what's going to happen there. They were supposed to be released on December 25th this year. Don't know if that's going to happen now. The Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, which is the next Marvel movie after Black Widow. No, the Eternals is after Black Widow. It'll be, I think it's supposed to be a 2021 release. Okay. But that's been halted as well because the director is being tested for the virus. He's in self-quarantine right now.
There you go.
And then also there's a Home Alone reboot that Disney's doing.
Oh, I'm not sure.
It's a shame.
I'm not sure I was aware of that.
Yeah, well, now you are. And it doesn't matter because it's on hold. Okay. Peter Pan and Wendy, another take on the Peter Pan thing is going on. I think that's a live action Disney version on hold. And the last one I'll mention, another Del Toro film. This one he's actually writing and directing called Nightmare Alley. Are you familiar with this?
I have heard of it, yes.
It's got Bradley Cooper starring in it. Okay. And so that one also has been completely just on hold. So it's not just a matter of films not coming out the next couple months. It's that we may see a dearth of films for some period of time in the coming year that are not going to come out on time, possibly. Do you remember when there was like a writer's strike several years ago and there was this whole thing where there was like a period of several months where there just wasn't a lot of new stuff on film and TV?
Yes.
I think we're going to experience a very similar kind of situation here.
Just like a gap.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'd be remiss if I didn't also say that, unfortunately, this whole thing is affecting film festivals as well. So South by Southwest was canceled fairly early on in this whole hubbub that started up. But Tribeca, I actually just read today, was announced as being canceled for this year. That was supposed to be going April 15th through the 26th. Okay. And our own local, more regional River Run International Film Festival just got canceled today as well. So it's a shame because these are places where these films were going to get an audience. And unfortunately, they got to look at some alternative ways. So really hate it for those filmmakers. I know how tough it is for independent films to get seen by people anyway. So hopefully they can find some alternative ways to get their film noticed. So.
Agreed.
Yeah. So anyway, that is kind of in the news right now. I felt it would be remiss if we didn't at least acknowledge it since it's having impact on a lot of the economy, but I think the movie theater business is really going to get shaken up by this whole deal.
Agreed.
Be anxious to see where it goes. So, all right. I think we're done with news. Unless we got anything else to share, I think we're caught up. Hopefully we'll have some much more positive news to share in the coming weeks of projects and maybe film schedules getting back on track. So, Chris, we always end our show here, though, with our last segment of the episode, and that is our recommendations. This is where Chris and I both share a film each that is either one we just recently caught up with, had a chance to see, maybe didn't feel like it got quite the audience it needed, or maybe just needs a good revisit from the past. Either way, it's a film that we feel like you'll be able to find online. So again, as you're doing your own self-quarantining and kind of staying solo or family in your household, you may be looking at some film options. Here are a couple you may want to consider. So, Chris, what have you got for us today?
So I'm going to recommend something that came out in October of 2019. It premiered on Netflix. And then I think with the start of the new season of Better Call Saul, they showed El Camino, a Breaking Bad movie, actually on AMC. I watched it, loved it, but forgotten about it until I was digging around to come up with a recommendation for the show. I was a big fan of Breaking Bad. I actually did not watch it when it was originally run on AMC. I caught up all with it on Netflix, like basically binge watched a lot of it.
Yeah.
I really liked it. When I had heard they were doing this, I was like, I don't really know where they're going with this. What are they doing? And the way they do it is they basically pick up exactly after the last episode of Breaking Bad and kind of follow Jesse Pinkman kind of on what was happening with his character at the end of the series. And for me, it was very satisfying. I was impressed that they were able to, granted, I guess you could say it's just one really long episode because it's like 2 hours, but it wasn't wasted. There was still a lot of creativity and jumping back and forth in time. And I thought it was really well done. So if you like Breaking Bad, and maybe you
never seen it.
Wow.
Never seen an episode.
To appreciate this, you do need to watch the series.
Yeah. So you don't recommend me just jumping into the movie, right?
I don't know, it'd be interesting to see if you thought it was any good. I think you would admire some of the cinematography and the acting and stuff, but you'll get more out of it.
It's a show I have on my list of shows to eventually try to watch at some point. So yeah, I'll watch it in the proper viewing sequence. Okay. But yeah.
Okay. Well, then you'll have one more thing after you get through the series, which it was like 5 seasons or something ridiculous. You'll have one more. Okay. Good. More thing to watch. So. Yeah, El Camino, it's on Netflix. They may still be rerunning it every now and then on AMC. But if you were a fan of Breaking Bad, I'd definitely recommend checking it out. No fear from me, at least, that they somehow ruined the series by putting this out. They should have just left it as it was. No, this was a worthwhile.
It's a worthwhile follow-up movie to it. So good.
So El Camino.
El Camino, that is on Netflix.
Yes.
Great. All right. So my recommendation, and I'm really bad. I haven't kept up my list of recommendations from our past, however many years we've been doing this. 7 years.
That's one of the things I use Letterboxd for.
I know you do. And I have a Letterboxd list that started and went for the first 2 or 3 years. And then I've kind of let it fall off the wayside. So it may be on that list, but you know what? It's at least been many years since I brought it up.
Fair enough.
And there's a couple reasons why I revisited this film recently. 2 reasons in particular. One, the lead actor in this film was in a film we saw not too long ago and we reviewed called Uncut Gems. Did not win a nomination at the Academy Awards. Considered maybe a little bit of a controversy. He did not, or a little bit of a snub, because he got a lot of acclaim. This is Adam Sandler we're talking about for his dramatic role in that film.
Right.
The other reason I brought this film up is because the director, Paul Thomas Anderson, was actually name-checked in the special thanks in Olympic Dreams, the first film that we reviewed at the top of the show. Not sure what role he played in Olympic Dreams or just if he was just friends with the crew and kind of supportive or what, but he got a special thanks call out in that. So it made me start thinking, Paul Thomas Anderson, Adam Sandler, hey, they worked together on a film called Punch Drunk Love. Now, I remember when I first saw Punch Drunk Love, I was a little taken aback, mainly, I think, in hindsight, because I didn't know what I was getting in for. And the fact is, the film is so unique in that it's a romance, but it's also probably what I would call one of the most tense and anxiety-ridden films I've seen. It made me nervous, but it also was sweet. It had a really hot, triggered performance by Sandler where he's very meek and nice and sweet, but then he'll just go off when he's triggered anger-wise. And it's just, it's a really chaotic but yet sweet film. And I think at the time I just didn't know how to process it. It is one who has gained an acclaim for me over time. Okay. And so I do want to recommend it. And any chance we have to see Philip Seymour Hoffman still in a role, I think it's worth it. He does play a mattress salesman. Well, yeah, he's a mattress salesman. But he also has a very menacing role, and he and Sandler have a interesting scene together, playing off each other. So basically, in a nutshell, Adam Sandler plays Barry Egan, someone who really just is really down on himself in his life. He's got 8 siblings, the only male with 8 siblings. He has his own business, but he's not getting anywhere because of his insecurities. He tends to have violent outbursts that occur when he becomes frustrated. But he does meet a woman played by Emily Watson. The character is Lena Leonard. And they do become attracted to one another, but yet he's still having difficulty kind of getting out of his shell. And anyway, it progresses from there. It's an interesting film. But I did want to kind of segue into one thing, Chris, and I probably could have made this a news item, but it just fits right here in the recommendation.
Okay.
I do like Punch Drunk Love. I do like pretty much all Paul Thomas Anderson's films. The one film I got to admit I need to go back and see again because it did not hit me as much as the rest of the film world is There Will Be Blood. As much as I love The Master, as much as I love Phantom Thread, absolutely love Phantom Thread. I love Boogie Nights. I love Magnolia. I'm a big fan of most all his films. There Will Be Blood is the one I'm supposed to love, and I just wasn't there when I saw it the first time, so I need to go back and visit it. But what does have me excited? I looked on IMDb, Paul Thomas Anderson. Just curious, what's he working on now? So since he did Phantom Thread, which you and I both loved, he's done a lot of music videos for the band Haim, which is something he's done. Haim, I'm not sure how you pronounce it. He's done like 4 or 5 music videos for them. Yeah. And of course he did Radiohead work. Yep. And he did the short film with Tom
York.
I forget the name of it. Anima. There you go. But he does have a feature film listed in production.
Is it with Daniel Day-Lewis back out of retirement?
Doesn't say. No. Doesn't have any stars attached yet.
Oh, okay.
And get this. Here's the name of the name of the film. It's Untitled Paul Thomas Anderson Project. Sounds awesome. No, actually.
Just he hasn't given up filmmaking. Right. That's all we know.
It does have a byline to it, so I at least know what the film's about.
Okay.
You ready for this? Set in 1970s San Fernando Valley, the film follows a high school student who is also a successful child actor. That's all I need to hear. I'm ready. Bring it on. Because if you had given me a quick little byline like that for any of P.T. Anderson's films before they came out, they would have sounded just as generic as that one. But yet he's turned them into something interesting all the way around. So
I have to say, I think I was on board with all of his films except, which I wonder if you've forgotten about this one.
Inherent Vice. Yeah, that's another one I need to go back. That one didn't work for me when I saw it.
No, it didn't work for me. There are moments in it, but overall it did not
work. Not a complete film. Yeah, in his whole filmography, Hard 8 was probably the film that kind of affected me the least. That was his very first film.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, no, it was good. It was a good film. It's just it's not one of my favorites of his.
Gotcha.
I love Boogie Nights. I love Magnolia. I love Punch Drunk Love. Okay. There Will Be Blood. I need to go back and see again. I love The Master. Inherent Vice, yeah, I had some issues with. And then I love Phantom Thread. So he's batting 80% for me at this point.
Doing pretty decent.
Yeah, pretty good. Yeah. And I guarantee if I go back and see Inherent Vice and There Will Be Blood again, I may have better feelings on both of them.
A problem of expectations.
Yeah, probably so. Okay, well, that was a long way around from my recommendation, but my recommendation is Punch Drunk Love by Paul Thomas Anderson, starring Adam Sandler.
Okay.
All right. So that's it for us. I think we're done. El Camino, Punch Drunk Love. We reviewed Olympic Dreams. We reviewed VHYes. And we talked about coronavirus delays in the film community. And we also talked about an interesting Peter Jackson Beatles documentary that will be coming out later in the year, it sounds like. Yeah, that Beatles documentary has a release of September, I believe.
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, good. So with that, we are done. We're going to go ahead and wrap it up. But Chris, there's a lot of opinions we have floated around, and I'm sure people listening may have their own. How can they contact us?
So you can send us an email to info@themesh.tv and just flag it in the subject line with Footcandle Films, and we'll read your question and get back to you on it. You can also follow us on Twitter @FootcandleFilm. I mentioned briefly that Alan and I both are on Letterboxd. I may use it just a tad more than Alan, but I am on there trying to track films that we watch. I will mention that our Footcandle Film Festival is September 23rd through the 27th. If you are a filmmaker that didn't get to go to South by Southwest or River Run or some other film festival because it's been canceled, and you would like to have your work featured at a festival, we're hoping come September we'll be corona-free and we'll be able to have filmmakers here. One way or the other, we'll have the film festival. Maybe it have to be online, but we're planning for it to be, a typical film festival at that point. But anyways, if you're interested in trying to have your film viewed, send us a note at info@themesh.tv and we'll try to work with you and at least let you submit it.
Sounds good. Well, again, we'd love to hear from you. So please keep in contact with us. And again, if festival comes up in the fall, we hope to see you joining us here in the Catawba County area, Western North Carolina. So with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. Thanks so much for listening, everybody. Stay tuned for the next episode coming up soon. Until then, take care. We'll talk to you soon.
See you in the ticket line for safe distance, providing for distancing.
Nice.
Watch films in the company of like-minded people in the dark. Watch films in the underground. We won't let anyone know where you are. The films that don't make it to Carmike at the mall, or ones that were famous when Grandpa would watch films out of the reverence of the heritage of an art. Watch films through the courtesy of Footcandle Film Society.
Special thanks to Carpal Tuller for the show theme music. For more about Carpal Tuller, visit www.carpaltuller.com. You've been listening to The Mesh, an online media network of shows and programs ranging from business to arts, sports to entertainment, music to community. All programs are available on the website as well as through iTunes and YouTube. Check us out online at themesh.tv. Discover other network shows and give us feedback on what you just heard.